to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No changes.
No, Mr. Chair.
So moved. Aye.
Consent agenda. Take a motion to approve the minutes from last April.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Up here. There's none. New business.
There is none.
Continue. Economic development section planning panel.
Good evening. Rebecca Kurtz, and with me is Shane Rudling again, both from Ellers. And tonight we're going to do our second in our series of developer panels and discussions, really kind of following the same format that we did last month with the industrial panel, to start high level, talk about the retail industry this month, and then as we go through the discussion, bring it down into some specifics of where our experts here believe Elko New Market is at, what can be done, and kind of how you can plan to expand retail as you look into the future when you get to the point of doing some of your strategic planning later on this year. So this evening we have Suzanne Shefsick, sorry about that, from Colliers, who has been working in the retail industry for many years and is going to bring some expertise. I believe at one point you did a lot with the automotive industry, but now at Colliers is working, across the board in all areas of retail. And then Paul Maynor with Maynor Property Advisors, also one of the experts in the retail industry and has worked through kind of the ups and downs, has a long history, worked through the recession and some of the challenges at that point, but helped companies continue to hold on and reinvest during that period of time. And now has his own property advisors or property management advisors as he works with retailers and continues in a little different aspect in this next chapter. So with that, I don't know if you guys would like to give any additional introduction of yourself, or we can jump right in with some of the questions. And go from
I'll
there.
start. Thank you very much, Paul Maynor, and apologies for my tardiness. I thought I could outsmart Google Maps and was unsuccessful there. But as Rebecca suggests, I have a long career in the commercial real estate industry. I've been in the practice of being a professional realtor for over 40 years. I have a background in valuation, which is my core discipline, which also then gave way to opportunities in the brokerage side of the business, the investment side of the business, as well as in the development side of the business. I've touched all the major food groups that comprise commercial real estate. I did spend a significant part of my career in the retail development sector, developing on my own behalf in partnership with others, as well as serving as an advisor and counselor to other individuals that had development projects and were interested in my involvement. Full disclosure, it's been a while since I've developed anything directly in the retail industry. There was this thing called the internet that came about that at one point tamed my enthusiasm for the retail sector. But retail is very much alive and well in certain segments. And I think Suzanne will be able to speak more directly to that. But I have worked with a number of planning commissions and city councils in my career. I have a pretty good sense as to what works, what doesn't work. I know how people think as it relates to the risk that they take as developers in terms of what they need to achieve both economically but also physically with their properties and interacting with local authorities like you is a big part of the equation in getting it right. So I have a pretty good handle as to how those interactions work. I have developed large format retail properties such as Targets. I've also done some urban infill redevelopment projects in more densely developed neighborhoods, but I've also worked back to the large format retail process, have worked in the past with retailers such as Shopko prior to their demise. So I have a pretty good sense as to how it works, and hopefully I can be of some help and a bit of a resource to you this evening.
So I'm Suzanne Chefsick. I'm a broker at Colliers. I primarily focus on both tenant rep, landlord rep, and also sales. So I'm involved in seeing who's coming to the market, what are the vacancy rates, what markets are folks looking for. I also work for a number of developers that develop retail, but also some multifamily and other types of projects as well. So I understand the landscape and what it takes to make sure that all of the pieces sort of fit together. I actually have a background in anthropology too, so studying demographics, how people are using space, and community-driven sustainability is actually part of my background as well, which translates kind of well to these types of situations also. So thanks everyone for having me, and happy to be a resource as well.
Thanks again to both of you for participating in the panel tonight. So you've got these questions, and the way it's organized is we'll start out a little bit macro, a little bit zoomed out, and then we'll zoom in a little bit to Elko. It's totally fine. This is informal. If you wander into Elko when talking about the macro, again, this is just however you feel the best way to express the answers to the questions. And then again, like with the panel, if there's things that come up in the intervening time here with the questions, feel free to weigh in like we did last time. So if Suzanne, maybe we could start with you and just talk about the trends in retail development. What does it look like today, and how retail is changing for brick and mortar development?
Yeah, so I think coming out of COVID, kind of the general thought process was, e-commerce is taking over, everyone's ordering their groceries online, retail is dead. That actually is not true. We're seeing the lowest vacancy rates we've ever seen in the market, sitting around 4%. More vacancy in the Minneapolis and St. Paul core, just given the crime rates and things that have happened there that are, a bit out of our scope. But for the suburbs, like Farmington, Lakeville, the surrounding areas here, we're sitting at about 4% vacancy. That being said, for new development, it's little to none at this current moment. We are seeing a handful of tenants like Chipotle. Starbucks was doing some development in some national brands, doing that ground up at this point. The reason it is so slow, given there's such high demand and such low vacancy, is the cost. So the cost right now per square foot to do a ground up development would place a tenant paying rent around $50 to $60 a square foot, and that's just base rent. For retail, we also add in insurance, property tax, and common area maintenance, like mowing the lawn and things like that, into the rent. So when you're charging a tenant $50 to $60 and then additional $12 to $15 for operating expenses, $70 a square foot is a lot of cookies or a lot of coffees or a lot of items that you're selling out of your retail store. So the cost to do development has been a significant challenge for everyone across both our markets and the national market as well.
Question,
Yeah.
were you in Las Vegas last week?
I was.
At the shopping center convention?
I sure was.
What was the general sentiment from that experience?
Yeah, people are wanting to expand. There's so many different retailers and, tenants that need this expansion. So we sat down with a handful, like Chuck and Don's, who are pet stores, some developers, some investors as well, and like everybody's ready. It's just the pricing is still not really adjusted to make ends meet. So I feel like there's a lot of pent up demand. It's just a matter of interest rates. It's a matter of tariffs. It's a matter of, the cost to build something today is just higher than we've seen.
Really good point. Just to sort of expand on that, it's just been a structural reset in our marketplace since prior to COVID. I mean, costs are anywhere from 30 to 40% higher.
Correct.
Just in totality, which includes just the bricks and mortar, the hard cost, but also the soft costs that go into these developments, such as the cost of financing in the capital markets. I think one thing to keep in mind, at least from the developer perspective, for a developer to actually pull off a retail development in today's world, they really need to have the commitment of the retailer in order to move forward. Any idea, if you build it, they will come, is really not a part of anybody's thinking anymore. Our growth landscape just isn't what it once was. And so for a developer to get there, they typically have to find a piece of land or work with a community like yours where there is a sufficient landscape where people can tell the story that, yes, you can be successful here. The developer then needs to speculate a fair amount of time and money in preparing a plan in order to be able to tell the story to the retailer as to why they should be here. And so it's a bit of a chicken and egg question. You know, I have to spend the money to create the story, but I can only spend so much on a speculative basis because that's part of my business. I know I have to do that. But it comes a point where if the retailer doesn't commit and the developer has spent money on plans and maybe even some legal documentation, probably not quite yet, but just some documentation to at least have an agreement to control the land site in order to be comfortable in spending that type of money to create the opportunity. Unless he or she can get the commitment to go ahead and move forward, they have to abandon those costs. And in many instances, that can be $20, $30, $50, $80, $100,000, depending on the scale of the development. And so the developer community is, you know, rightly so, very wary of how far they speculate their efforts and their money prior to pulling off a development. So that's just one of those bits of a calculus that the developer community goes through in order to determine whether there's really an opportunity. And the retailers, Suzanne can speak more directly to this, the retailers are looking for them to expand in today's world. Nothing's guaranteed, of course, but they want to see as bulletproof an opportunity as they can present to an investment committee, because that's really, or some committee that would green light the move forward with a development. So a lot of pieces have to fall into place. An amenable or an open for business mindset from a community like yours is a crucial piece to the equation. And so that helps. The fact that you're even having this conversation, I think, is really healthy and encouraging, and does telegraph to the development community, the brokerage community, that, you know, this is a place that business can be done. Now, whether the factors are in place where people can sign up and say, yes, this is for me, all remains to be determined.
Question?
Yes.
What would you have seen rent cost prior to COVID, that, you know, relative to the increase, just to get kind of a base where we were back in 20, before, you're looking at $50 to $60 triple net now, what would it have been back then?
Oh, you said 40 to 60%, so at least 40 to 60% less. Yeah. Right now, CAM and operating expenses are going up year over year around 18%, and a lot of that has to do with property taxes and insurance that have been going up and up, especially in the state of Minnesota. And Minnesota is sheltering a lot of the insurance claims that are happening in other parts of the country with climate change as well. So those factors are definitely eating into some of that cost. That's out of our control to a large degree. But yeah, rents were down, I would say low teens. Low to.
And
teens.
in pretty much, or I should say, in most instances, the retailer will do a projection as to how many haircuts can I do? How many cups of coffee can I sell? Whatever the business model is, what do I realistically think I can generate in terms of gross revenue for the business opportunity at hand? And they have their own metrics as to, you know, what's my profit margin in order to move forward, and they'll have their own limits as to, I can devote X number of dollars to rent on a percentage basis. used to be 6, 7, 8%, 12%, depending on the retailer itself. Some businesses have much higher margins. A jewelry store, for instance, has very nice margins, but other businesses, they're not as profitable. So for them to fuel new development, they really have to be certain that they can achieve those sales. And unfortunately, the environment is such that the cost to create the retail opportunity has outpaced their ability to generate sales. Now, in sort of extreme examples, in more urban locations, France Avenue near Southdale, some retailers will sign up and maybe sort of look the other way at that equation because it's retail signage. They've got great car traffic going by and a lot of people looking at their logo, and that's almost marketing. So they will pay for that in some regards in higher rent. But those are the Chase banks of the world, the Fidelity investment brokerage houses of the world, et cetera. So, on more day-to-day goods and services, they really focus on what can I sell.
It's a great segue to the next question. So you mentioned Starbucks and Chipotle. We've talked about cups of coffee and haircuts and things like that. But what types of businesses and users are actually happening today?
All of them. It depends on where you are. I would say the biggest driver of the tenants that are going places are households, foot traffic, and drive-by traffic. So I know in this community, roughly the population's 5,000 people. To get a big anchor like that, we're talking 15,000 for national brands, sometimes even higher than that. So it really comes down to how many roofs, how many drivers, and how many people are in your community. For this size of a community, I would probably think, I think there's a pharmacy here, but pharmacy, quick service restaurants, small local retailers, more mom and pop. You're not going to see the national credit tenants coming here, at least not at this stage. Maybe near the freeway, just given the access and the pad sites in neighboring Lakeville are all kind of spoken for. You could maybe get somebody over there, but it's going to probably be a few years if I'm being realistic. I would say to try to drive some of that retail traffic here, a couple things would be to focus on, multifamily development, get more houses, more roofs, more traffic to the area, focus on walkability. I noticed there's a great little corridor of downtown here that's got, sidewalks. I think there's a lot of potential to create some pad sites, but something that's like a real true corridor that people aren't driving here and driving there and driving over here for their retail. That's not what people really want to see. That's not what the tenants and the retailers want for their site. They want a true retail corridor.
And I also think that, correct me if I'm wrong, you're closer, but there is this evolution in the retail landscape where retailers are looking for more of an experience, to be able to deliver an experience to their customers, to their clients. And so some of the, again, back to more densely developed areas, they're looking at creating opportunities where there are synergies between other businesses, and they can sort of curate an opportunity for people to, feel more comfortable about spending their time and money in that location. These are more higher end development types, but even translating that into retail settings themselves, and you've probably noticed this yourself. There is a reemergence in some instances of customer service. People are refreshing their stores. They do want them to be inviting. They do want to make it a more convenient or conducive moment in time where people are shopping. So that's infused the retail mindset. At the end of the day, it really depends on how many bodies are in a certain demographic to support what it is that I do.
I think another key component to consider is what is the value proposition for your town? What type of foot traffic are you hoping to get here? What types of people are living here? That will really drive who the tenant mix is that would really serve this community. Paul mentioned, experiential. Yes, that is true, but also service-oriented. People need their car oil changed, people need to get their hair done, their nails done. So services like that, where you're not gonna be competing with Amazon, you're not gonna be competing with Target in Lakeville. People are gonna wanna go in their community to do those things that are local, that are quick and easy, for that service component.
If I may ask a question, is there any sort of direct inquiry from people in the community about, we wish we had this, we wish we had that? Is that what's driving a lot of this discussion?
Everybody wishes we had.
Hardware store, grocery store.
We'd be lucky to get Dollar General. You know, we're out, we're south, we're out. We got hayland and fields.
You know, there's a Dollar General in Lonsdale. Yeah, just sold it. Yeah.
Because everything is 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
Why would they come out here?
So there are a few different business types that are more pronounced and wanted than others, but I wouldn't say that's the reason why we're doing this work. We haven't done this in a while, so
Sure.
we're doing it freely, not based on that, but we'd like just more information in general.
Yeah.
So.
Car counts, how do you take that into account relative to population? Because even though we don't have a large population, we do have maybe a little higher car count because of people getting on the freeway and feeding from the south and the west.
Yeah, I actually pulled some data from a server called Placer AI. So they're pulling cell phone data to be able to track how many people are going in certain locations at what time. So if you have your phone on and you have location settings turned on, so it's not 100%, but it's a pretty high percentage of phone data that we pull. So I actually was impressed to see that Quick Trip is pulling about 1 million people a year to come into your community just to go there. So there are ways to pull the data to see where people are going. I'm happy, you know, if there's stuff that you want to have pulled, if you're curious, you know, how many people are commuting out of your town. I pulled that data as well, and where are they going to for work? How many people are staying within your community? I would say on the yeah, right, and I can tell you what type of Instagram accounts you're following. It gets really crazy and creepy, if I'm being honest. That's the world we live in. So I would say most of your community is commuting out north to go to work. It's a small percentage of people are either working from home or are staying at home. There's a handful that are going west, but for the most part, people are going up through Lakeville and even further north. You're not getting a ton of through traffic outside of that Quick Trip. It's not necessarily a place that people are, you know, coming to except for the Speedway during those times of the Speedway and the movie theater. So you do have a little bit of experiential here, which is driving a little bit of traffic. But I think to support bigger retail, it needs to be either more houses in your community or some kind of external experiential drive, whether that's a really vibrant downtown or something else is
So
needed.
stopping the commuters that come through here every day, feeding them, New Prague, Lonsdale, Montgomery area, doesn't really excite retailers enough to overcome that the population isn't there yet?
Yeah, not specifically, no, because right now it's, at least the data that I'm pulling, it's showing that they're stopping to go to Quick Trips. They're not necessarily come to Elko New Market.
Right. But they're
Which is
coming
different.
through.
They
So
are.
If there was something else next to there, then does a retailer look at that and say, well, we got this, if we put something complimentary there?
Yes. And in my mind, you know, what would be complimentary to the Quick Trip would be a discount tire, you know, some kind of repair shop, something of that nature, which is not sexy, but it's needed potentially in the community. What was that?
We got park out.
Okay.
So you, Paul had talked about the idea of corridors, and you talked about walkability and creating that environment, and that suggests a certain amount of density of commercial. Is there anything to the concept that there's like a critical mass of commercial you need to have in order for it to be healthy and successful long-term, like a certain acreage or some sort of a mix, or it's fine, you can have this here and that there, you know, you can have 2 acres here and 1 acre there and 4 acres over there? Or is there, no, if you want something to be successful in a certain type, you should have at least 5 acres or 10 acres of commercial, or stuff should be within a certain proximity of each other? Even if you can't assign certain numbers to it specifically, is there anything to that concept, or is it very unique to each market?
I think it always starts somewhere with something that is seeing an opportunity and then drives the pursuit of creating an asset to support the business idea at hand. I think the idea, I think for a community like yours, if there was some entity or some business that were capable and saw an opportunity to play an anchor type role, I think it could be allowed to grow, frankly, somewhat organically around that. I mean, the marketplace will figure out what it needs to do. And so I would dissuade you from thinking prescriptively about, well, we want this here, we want that there, and we want this here, unless there was really a well thought out, well developed plan that also had flexibility built into it. And perhaps you're not suggesting that, but
No, I was thinking more like less 50,000 feet and more like 100,000 feet. Like, how much acreage should we preserve in particular areas for that type of use? In a growing community like ours, we're under constant pressure to take property that's zoned commercial in areas that seem appropriate for commercial and convert it to residential. Because the market today is for residential because rooftops come, and Suzanne kind of confirmed that, rooftops come first. So developers like, I want high visibility for my residential development, so I want to go at that commercial corner. And so we're constantly under pressure. For decades, we've been under pressure as a community to convert property that's guided for commercial to be residential. And so there always becomes that policy question of, well, how much commercial do we need to really, how should we be preserving so we don't shoot ourselves in the foot for 3 decades down the road?
That's a very good question, because clearly the property owners want to be able to monetize their property if they have an opportunity, because that opportunity for them is today, not tomorrow. So I think preserving obvious things could be part of your mindset. I mean, the corners, I think you'd really have to study this in terms of, okay, based on what we know about retail today, because retail is changing constantly. Who knows? Maybe the corners turn into great sort of drone drop zones or drone charging station zones that people then drive up and get stuff and go. Who knows? So the way we've thought about retail in the past was, you need 15 acres for a grocery store and the ancillary shops and the outlots and the circulation. I think it's hard to answer the question with any specificity. I'm sorry. I just think the retail landscape and the way people, our resident anthropologist here will say that the way people move and interact with real estate it's almost evolving at a hyperspeed today compared to what we all grew up with, where things were fixed, we knew it, the market reacted well to that grocery store or the hardware store, and that's just the way it was. And I think I do think technology has really disrupted the retail sector. The things that are in demand right now are the things that you can't get online. I can't get a haircut online. I can't get a cup of coffee online, and I can't change my oil online. So, there are the basic nuts and bolts of life that I think are kind of crucial. Food is one thing that maybe you would consider as a use. In today's world, it's Aldi. It's some of the other small format grocery stores, but also then the large format ones as well. Smaller might be the way that Elko Newmarket evolves. Aldi, for instance, has a rural strategy in smaller communities around Minnesota. And I don't know where the closest Aldi is.
11 minutes.
Okay. There's the answer. There's the answer.
And there's a Coborn's not too far. So for grocery, I think, 1, you're too small, and 2, you're too close. So I don't know, given you have convenience stores like Quick Trip, it may or may not appeal to a grocer, if I'm being totally honest. To get a big grocery store chain like that, we're talking 20,000 residents, which is a ways away. So to answer your question, to hold these parcels for something like that, I don't know if that's in your best interest. They'll figure out a spot to go in the event you get big enough. They'll get creative. They'll work with you to find that zoning, 5, 10, 15 years down the line. I would say, kind of to echo Paul's sentiment, like what is very evident to me is that downtown quarter here where there's that old gas station, there's a couple of lots that look vacant, a couple of houses. I'm not entirely sure how they're zoned right now, but in my mind, like that is the retail corridor right here in the New Market Strip right off 2. So keeping that commercial makes sense in my brain. If you're really up against, people wanting to do residential, you could go down the path, plug your ears as a developer, with apartments on top and retail below and doing mixed use. Developers and owners don't love that, but then at least, the developer could make their margins on the apartments and create a space to then lease out to a tenant, so that could keep costs down for a new tenant coming into the space, which likely would be a local hardware store or local tenant of some kind.
So most of that answer was right on. No, actually, you answered Thomas's question better than I did. I just was going to comment on the, a multifamily with some retail on the bottom. I would strongly encourage you not to mandate that or require that as part of a development. It just makes everything hard. And in most instances, when a developer is trying to run through their financial analysis of the overall opportunity, they still have to spend the same amount of dollars per square foot to create that retail space, but the chances of them actually leasing it at a rent that would support that cost are really low. I mean, there's stuff all over the place, in Uptown and St. Louis Park and, denser areas. It just, the marketplace doesn't think that way.
Speaking with,
Just before, are you going to say the same topic?
Yeah.
Okay.
so, speaking with some developers on that topic, they indicated other than very unique high-density areas, they have indicated that in those situations, the residential actually ends up within the pro forma supplementing the commercial. Is that true in your experience?
Yes.
Yes.
And I heard you say, don't require it, or don't,
Mandate it.
mandate it, but have you seen any successful ways to incentivize it? I mean, so if you reinforce the mixed use, and to know that there's a gap, or a potential gap, and it may be more challenging, so instead of mandating it, it's things that you've seen communities do to incentivize those types of mixed use.
I think to Suzanne's earlier point about the structural cost of things, the incentives, frankly, make the more pure development more likely to occur than not. And so to try to incentivize that component, I think you'd have to ask the question, why are we trying to drive for this as a potential use within this development? I think, and this is me with my full developer hat on, you need to, within the confines of your zoning and your comprehensive land use plan, obviously that has to be adhered to. But if you can figure out a big, fat, red, easy button for the developer to hit in order to achieve, you want them to be successful. And I think the easier you make it for them, the better. Not that nobody's asking you to, give away the store, no, far from it. But if there's a legitimate gap in the pro forma between what it's gonna cost and the rents I can get, and I need some help in order to create, this number of residential units as a pure residential play, I would encourage you to try to work with them as well as you can.
I would say something else you could consider, and I'm not as familiar with this, so I don't, maybe Paul has more to say on it, but there are potential funding pots for like downtown Main Street corridors. I recall Baldwin, Wisconsin had some of this funding to help revitalize their Main Street and make the cost more accessible for like art galleries and certain types of tenants. Additionally, the Met Council does have grant funding to do ground-up developments for mostly multifamily, but community-driven type projects. So the Livable Communities, it's called grant. I'm actually one of the grant funders, so I'm very familiar with the process, but I feel like it could be something you could consider as a city to then be able to share those dollars with the developer as an incentive to come here and kind of share those costs.
If I can circle back to your question regarding reserving land areas. I referenced earlier, I spent some time, this about 20 years ago, and I was involved in developing retail concepts for more rural communities. At the time, it was a retailer out of Omaha named Pomida, if any of you remember that. Pomida was then acquired by Shopko. But their strategy was, and I'm a native of Omaha, Nebraska, which is where they were headquartered, so I was well familiar with them in the first place. But their strategy was, we are going to go into the county seat, and there is no competing retail. We will buy the local pharmacist, we will build a store, we'll put the pharmacist in the store, we'll build about a 20 or 22,000 square foot general merchandise retail store, and we will serve that county seat, the 2,500 people, and probably anything within 20 or 30 miles of that. It was a captive audience, and it worked until it didn't. So you have this situation where you are close enough to the Twin Cities that you are still part of it, but you're far enough away that you are your own thing, but you're still part of it. So it's unfortunately not a comparable situation, even though those smaller populations could drive the viability of those stores. Suzanne has referenced, your Main Street here. That might be where the real opportunity is, to create something unique, something appropriate for the area, and to create those, and I can see some experiential opportunities with it too. It is compact, it's walkable. This is lovely land down here just to begin with, and you've got some gentle terrain and some gentle topography that rolls through the city. I mean, I could see some future opportunity there. And further to your point, if there is a need from a retailer that they need a certain amount of acreage and they're driven to really want to invest here, they'll figure out a way. They will figure out the land opportunity that they can use, because there still is an abundance of land here, relatively speaking. And yes, I know you would like to try to preserve some of that commercial land. There's also a here and now. If you have an opportunity to build out that land for a residential use, and perhaps the near-term strategy, 10, 15 years, is to work with the downtown corridor. Now I'm giving recommendations about what you should do, and I don't think you've asked for that, but the downtown corridor might be an area to really begin exploring even further than perhaps you already have. But larger format retailers will figure out a way if they really want to be here.
Just to double down on that point as well, in terms of your downtown corridor, I noticed that you have a building that's on the National Historic Registry that, I don't know what the plans are for that, but in my mind, that's could be a center point of your community, some historic building with a new use, some kind of either experiential or retail thing that's driving people there. We've seen this in I'm not saying that you're Excelsior, but downtown Excelsior created this beautiful hotel in a historic building right on the main street that has a coffee shop downstairs that's really driven a lot of traffic. So I'm thinking something, along those lines. There's a lot of potential here, I think, for something of that nature.
Might we strategically focus on kind of a barbell approach? In other words, you've got the downtown over here and you've got the freeway over here. And rather than trying to fill in this whole thing that doesn't sound like it's gonna happen anytime soon. And I'm not suggesting that we walk away with something, but is that kind of what you're thinking? Is we've got these two things
Yes and no. I think given the Speedway and the Quick Trip and some of that development that's sort of in between, that's kind of another little node on the path here. But yeah, generally speaking, the retailers want to be either direct visibility from the freeway, but also that could be a potentially good multi-family development spot. We see a lot of developers looking for that direct freeway access as well. But yes, this downtown corridor certainly is one of the bigger commercial nodes to keep it all kind of in one general area.
So I came in from the west, and did I notice a newer elementary or middle school or high school?
Yep.
Elementary. So that, I mean, I think about the traffic that generates. And to your point, you know, on the west end, maybe there is something that, some interactive retail opportunity that can take advantage of the amount of traffic that's going to and from that institution, just from a generalized sense. One thing I had spent also part of my career working for a senior living, in the senior living space, and knowing that our audience, that the decision maker for senior living in many instances, quite frankly, is the adult daughter who's trying to help mom and dad. I always tried to find and try to understand sort of the anthropological standpoint. What is she doing on a daily basis? And is there a way that we can locate communities that are in her path of travel to and from, knowing that she likely would be there 2-3 times a week visiting somebody? So, you know, where do we situate that to make her life convenient? So sort of thinking about the assets and the resources that you already have in place and what kind of traffic they generate, the character, the nature, the volume of it, thinking about that may help inform how you think about the retail question as well.
Piggybacking off of that, sorry, this is a question you asked a while back, Shane, but in terms of what retailers would make sense here with the new school and the growing community of young families here, I think there's certainly potential for a daycare provider to be here. I notice there's a number of in-home daycares and one local daycare, but as a mom, I know how much it, you know, weighs on you to try to figure that out. There's a long waiting list, at least, you know, where I live in and around Golden Valley, but I know it's not just that part of the Twin Cities. So I could certainly see that type of a retailer expanding, and they have the capital to do it. A lot of them are backed by private capital as well. So like even to get a national tenant, I don't think is out of the question. Again, it may be down the road, but I could see something like that.
I'll just add one comment about the vertically integrated mixed use. You know, again, a lot of times when we present on economic development, we always say you can only nudge markets. And I've had a couple of experiences when I worked in Bloomington as the Port Authority Administrator where we put in and mandated and paid for the ground floor retail only to have it fail multiple times with those same tenants. And so even though if you pay for the capital cost of it all in, it's still kind of an albatross sometimes that just doesn't work. And so it doesn't make sense sometimes, especially we're talking an area east of the Mall of America that's got, you know, 2,000 housing units right now, right? But still, it can't support, you know, a coffee shop, which seems crazy because you got 400 people living, or 400 units in the building right above it, but it still can't support a coffee shop even with 1,200 units that you can literally walk across. So it just goes to show, like, you know, back at the time of my life when I lived in an apartment building, you walk down the hallways and you almost never see anybody in the hallways, right? People are off doing their things, and even though there might be 400 units there, you still can't drive enough coffee sales to support something. So some of those things just don't make sense, but, you know, the market is really powerful, and you can only just nudge it a little bit, especially with incentive, the tools that we have in Minnesota. So I'll take my panelist hat off, put on my interviewer hat back on.
Keep going.
So we talked a little bit about grocery, but let's just delve into that. You know, a little bit more, you know, how many rooftops do we really need? I mean, we talked about the Aldi being close and Coburn's and whatnot, but just don't want to foreclose any other comments you have about grocery, because I know that they've been on that path for some time.
Yeah, I think I mentioned around 15 to 20,000. So you're a bit of a ways off. I think, especially given the traffic patterns that I mentioned, where folks are going, you know, past a Target, past the Walmart, past the Cub Foods, on their daily commutes, to get that type of a grocery anchored center here just seems, in my mind, a bit of a pipe dream. I'm sorry to say that, and crush anybody's dreams here, but it just doesn't feel like the capacity is here. And then, you know, if you go straight west, there's the Coborns, which is maybe 15 minutes away as well, in New Prague. So I think between the two, it just feels like a challenge. Maybe you feel differently.
No, it's unfortunately a numbers game. You know, it's a number of bodies to support the need for the product. And if there's convenient places otherwise to get it, people seek the path of least resistance. I mean, I think we all do.
Yeah.
In our shopping habits. And how do I make it easy?
But do you have a farmer's market? Could you do some kind of local small events to bring groceries here on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, something to that effect, to get people, you know, frequenting the downtown, shopping locally, that type of a thing?
We tried farmer's market and invested a lot of resources into it, and it failed. So,
I mean, it was in a bad location,
Very bad.
so that's what I will put there. But, because there was a lot of interest in the farmer's market, it was held in the Speedway's parking lot,
Okay.
and so there's not, I mean, it wasn't like
Downtown?
right here.
Yeah, get a couple food trucks, get, you know.
And I think it was
Get a bluegrass band.
Yeah, some
midday
fanfare.
during the week as well. And
Okay,
a lot of us
yeah.
leave.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what we found is that we partnered actually with the St. Paul's Farmers Market. They could not get vendor interest to come.
Oh,
here,
interesting.
was the primary issue.
Could you get vendor interest? I mean, doesn't Lakeville have a handful of food trucks? Could we,
From a food truck standpoint, I think we would get interest.
yeah,
But it wouldn't be like a true farmer's market. It would just be it'd be a food truck festival.
sure. Interesting. I'm just thinking, I know in Minneapolis, you know, it's every weekend, Saturdays, Sundays, to your point, you know, the bluegrass band, a couple food trucks, vendors, some artists, to kind of round it out, something like that. I feel
Prior
like.
Lake has a big one,
Mm-hmm,
so it's,
yeah,
we're kind of.
yeah, you're close.
Question was going to be capturing what comes up. Could we capture anything off of the freeway in as much as it's 8 miles farther south to the next exit,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that there's quite a few of them as we go north. But is there a specific demand that we might capture as those people before they get to Lakeville?
Potentially. In my mind, Lakeville's already kind of got everything you need, so to try to recreate that before you get up there just seems like a little bit of a waste of resource.
But
Again, I would
specifically,
say,
they don't maybe have that, they don't
yeah,
have space or they don't want.
right. Like, again, I would throw it to you. What is it that people, what is driving people to live here? What is the community feel, the vibe, that the downtown, you know, that potentially could be here, I think is a differentiator. Like, sure, Lakeville has its downtown, but it's so far removed from the rest of the city that I feel like it's right here in the heart of your city. It could be a really nice selling point, but I don't know your town as well.
But to pull them off of the freeway, the commuters, the people that are coming north on the weekends or whatever, there's nothing unique that comes to mind that might grab them to drive some development, which would then be there for the rest of the week for us, but at least there'd be a little more impetus for somebody to look at.
My sense on that is, and I'm speaking from personal experience, when I'm on the freeway and I'm going from A to B, I really want to get to B. And I'm making a beeline for B. So as I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, you know, what would pull people off? And forgive me, but my mind is going to like South Dakota. I'm like, Wall Drug, Corn Palace. No, seriously, it's that kind of thing that might distinguish your community. And frankly, but it needs somebody to drive that. It needs somebody with but maybe it needs somebody that can activate some of the DNA that makes your community what it is and why it is so attractive to live here for people. And sort of bringing that to life in some form in your downtown area or somewhere nearby to create a thing. Forgive me, I mean, this isn't as specific as you want, but I think maybe encouraging some really super out-of-the-box thinking might not be a bad thing. You know, spark some creativity amongst the marketplace. There may be somebody in your community that's sort of got an idea. But I think that might be, and that's a long time in the making, but sometimes things, you know, catch fire. You don't know. That's aspirational.
But you do have an experiential thing here, the Speedway, and correct me if I'm wrong, the outdoor movies, are they still doing that? So how do you publicize that and draw the crowds in for those types of things? Are you working with, you know, branding? Are you working with the influencer? Are you working with, you know, magazines, PR to like get that information out there to the masses? From a Speedway perspective, I think there's only like 3 in the whole entire metro. So are you reaching the people that would drive maybe from Elk River or other parts of the metro that seem really far away, but because it is such a draw, it is something unique to get people to come to your town. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and create this whole new branding strategy. Like, you have something that most communities don't have. So how can you use that to your benefit?
Well, I mean, it's not like full-time events, but they're picking up, they're ramping up. And then, I mean, then sprinkle on some of the other off weekends, you have the flea market, which it was fantastic seeing all those cars here this last weekend and stuff like that. So to leverage those instead,
Those are sort of experiential events. I get that. They're sort of one and done, at least at that moment, but it creates exposure. It brings people in. And, you know, this is all the evolution that I think you are all desiring to continue to be a part of here. It will take time, but you got to start somewhere. And I think, to Suzanne's point, you know, I think a lot of people, they hear Elko New Market and they think of the Speedway. I mean, you've already got that. So I'm sort of I try to pay attention to the younger people in my world, and because of the way that they're doing things and the way that they are harnessing social media to create new opportunities. I'm sort of intrigued, you know, that there will be new things that keep coming and new formats that keep emerging. And so I historically have thought of retail in this, you know, pure bricks and mortar capacity. You know, we have lived through the .com bubble and the evolution of the internet. Now we've got, you know, artificial intelligence driving a lot. I mean, it's just constantly evolving, and so new things do spring out of that. But I think anchoring it to, you know, what you do have and what does drive the community, and then somehow distilling this, I call it the DNA of any community, what really makes it what it is. How do you harness that or catalyze that in a way to create either another experience or an opportunity for someone to bring an idea to life?
You know, you talk about bringing people off the freeway. I mean, I know that when I'm traveling from A to B, I'm also looking, if I need to stop at A.1 to get something, I want it to be quick and easy. There's been a lot of talk about the intersection and how it exists today, which is a great thing, obviously, and the redesign that they all want to have happen over time. I started out my career as an engineer, and I still, to this day, cringe a little bit at access control. So I think one of the things that you might think about is, you know, when that, right now it's super convenient, right? It's maybe underwhelming, not as nice and wide as you'd want it eventually. But, you know, the design of that I think is really critical. I'd like to hear from the panelists what they think about that. You know, MnDOT controls a lot of that, right? But you have a say on how that's all gonna go. But how do you feel about, the design of that eventually affecting, in particular, retail? It's not gonna be the folks that are gonna, stay in the community, but obviously that helps, right? The people that are driving by are buying a burrito, people that live in town are, drive over and buy a burrito too.
My comment on that would be, to the extent you do have input as to how that is designed, trying to prevent barriers to entry for people to get off of that road and into retail opportunities that could surround that. Retailers want to see as quick and as easy to get people to my front door and park right in front. And so if the requirement is, yes, we'll let you put retail here, but you can't access it unless you go half a mile west and then hook back, and then, then we're gonna get there because we're worried about, traffic bottlenecks, et cetera. Your viewpoint is, we welcome the bottleneck. Traffic is a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I would echo the same sentiment.
Cool. What are the characteristics of a good or bad city to work with?
Well, first of all, you're already ahead of the game in that you are convening a meeting like this, which suggests to me that you're open for how do we do it as efficiently and as respectfully as you can do it. Great start. Transparency is really important. Setting expectations with the developer community is really important in terms of really spelling it out as plainly as you can. Here is our process, and here is a prospective timeline, because time is money for everybody. Here's a prospective timeline and number of meetings that would be potentially required for your project, and making that super digestible for people to understand. And if there is a development agreement that is required, give them a draft of your form development agreement up front, so that they would know before they really get down the road, what is it that we're walking into. I know of communities that have used the development agreement as it's a point of negotiation, and they'll hang on to it until the very last second. The developer then doesn't have the opportunity to really shape it the way they need it. They're sort of forced into things that they don't want. And developers don't like that. And so, there are good developers out there that will give you the give and take that is necessary in any type of relationship. You've got to protect yourself, of course. You've got to protect the community. So you'll have your own team of people involved. But I think transparency, expectations, and managing expectations, and just overall general notion of openness and cooperation is your brand as a city, as to how you conduct your business. I think that would, for me, be the hallmark of a really good city community to work with.
Efficiency and flexibility would be my two. Developers don't want to wait 14 weeks to get a decision for something that could take 3 or 4 weeks, whether or not they could have a conditional use permit, if their zoning is allowed, those types of things. In terms of a flexibility standpoint, yes, you can zone things commercial, but I think getting really granular, like you can only put one automotive shop on this little corner way down here, and outside of that, we're only going to allow a restaurant in this location. That really stifles growth, I think. And it also stifles who can come to your town, because there's so many limited areas and where they can go. So I think having it be kind of broad strokes, and you can talk about it as it comes, and being willing to work with developers, whether that's giving them some TIF funding or whatever they need to get things together, and working as a partnership, opposed to it's your city and you're making the rules and they're coming in. It just doesn't work.
And it's fair for you as well to ask for transparency from them. Show us the numbers.
Suzanne, you talked about TIF, so it's a great segue again. So what expectations would there be for incentives for retail? Now, Rebecca and I live in the TIF world a lot, and you guys, I'm
Yeah.
sure, do as well. The opportunities for TIF for retail are more limited than housing, but there is still some opportunities. There's also incentives beyond TIF. But what do you guys think about incentives for retail?
So in terms of TIF, honestly, I haven't seen much, if any of it. It's, to your point, it's mostly for multifamily, which then would drive some of the retail conversation. So I still think it is important, how you can use it. Again, I don't want to talk about the mixed use, but it can be used in that type of a way if you want to drive some dollars to support multifamily with retail on the bottom type of a scenario. I also mentioned there are other grant funding pots you can look into, the Met Council and some others. I'm not as familiar in that whole world of funding. Maybe I would lean on Paul or your expertise a bit more for that, but.
Well, and I think some of the question is, like, is it an expectation from the retailer? As much as, like, not necessarily what is the tool, but are they expecting?
I don't think it's an expectation. I would say what would be probably an easier ask of you is, shovel-ready sites that have access to plumbing, that have sidewalks, that have turn lanes, thinking about the infrastructure of the space in advance, that's what they're looking for. From a financing perspective, they're not really looking for handouts, they're just looking for something that they can easily develop and put their spot into without having to talk to MnDOT about a new stop sign or how many turn lanes do they have, that type of a thing.
Another thing to, I think, just touch on is that the developer community they're the ones that would be asking for the TIF mostly. And in many instances, developers that work with retailers are doing it in such a way that their real objective is to create an investment in order to sell that investment, the triple net lease arrangement that you described. So if Suzanne is representing Aldi and I've got a site that Aldi wants to be on, I will be happy to build them a store. I would probably require a 20-year lease commitment in return for that, because once I create an income stream from a retailer of the caliber and quality of Aldi, that's a valuable income stream that investors will pay good money for. So back to the time is money point for the developer, complicating that equation with seeking tax increment financing, it all depends on what the situation is. But that kind of complicates the financing, it complicates the timing. And frankly, I think if push came to shove, if somebody could get in the ground today and build the building and get it leased and get it opened, I think many folks would probably default to doing that than waiting another 6 months for a TIF agreement to be negotiated and approved and then financed separately. So, as they say in our business a lot, time kills deals. And if you can get in the ground much quicker than not, I think a lot of people would default to that. So I think, to Suzanne's point, it wouldn't prevent people from asking for TIF, but I don't know if you have to lead with that.
I would also mention for, big funding pots like that, I don't know if you've explored the idea of like a master developer or master development plan where there's one developer that will be bringing the tenants and doing some multifamily and having that full-scale plan. We're seeing cities like Blaine navigate that right now. There's a lot of examples of that happening throughout the metro. Somebody else that's kind of taking that infrastructure piece on, and in that case, I would probably err on the side of more funding from the city to give them the incentive to do that. But from like a one-off tenant by tenant perspective, I guess was more the point I was trying to make earlier.
I have some.
Tax abatement come into the mix?
That would help. Because in these lease agreements, what the developer does is the developer says it costs me, I'm going to make up numbers here, it costs me $1 million to build the building, soft cost, everything all in. I'm going to charge this would be ideal for a developer, I want a 7% return on that cost, so my rent is $70,000 a year. That's really what the developer is building for. Any other costs that are incurred are always borne by the tenant. The tenant has to pay for the cost of maintaining the building, the parking lot, the insurance, the taxes, everything. So whatever makes it easier on the retailer, such as tax abatement, frankly, makes the developer's $70,000 that much more valuable, because it only helps the retailer be successful by minimizing, their total rental cost for being in that space.
So I'm one of the planners at the city, and when I think of our commercial development, we really have what I call like 3 separate areas. So we have the area by the interchange, and then we have a commercial area along the County Road 2 corridor, and then we have our downtown area. And what I'm hearing you say, Suzanne, in particular, is that right now, we should be focusing on downtown, or that might be most attractive to create a sense of place. Of course, that's like a planning term, creating a sense of place, and those are the places that I like to go to.
Yes.
I don't want to go to a restaurant in a strip mall. I want to go to, on a Friday night, I want to go to a restaurant in a charming downtown. So just, do you have any takeaways or advice on like when we might expect development in these 3 different categories?
Sure. Well, one, I'm not a city planner, so I just want to preface it with that. But given the size of your current population and where I'm seeing some development happening off of, 2 in Dakota, and there's some new D.R. Horton developments, it looks like maybe a multifamily or senior living thing happening over there. It looks like there's growth right here. So it would make the most sense in my mind to attract tenants. And you have some existing infrastructure already built. So I know that there's a couple single-family homes right there. I don't know if they're zoned for commercial or if you intend to do that. Could they be repurposed to be something without having that ground-up development cost? I saw that there's that grain and feed or whatever, the pet.
Just one on the market.
Yep, so could we repurpose these buildings to start drawing those people to that location? Right now, in my mind, is low-hanging fruit. It's the cheapest, it's there, people are living there, people are driving past there,
Yeah.
and then build on that. From there, I would say the freeway and even over by the Speedway, given that the Quick Trip is there, it's gonna be ground-up, new site development. Those likely in this market are gonna be national tenants. And to get those national brands, we need the households first, which is over here.
Just FYI, those 2 single-family homes you keep talking about, we actually own those.
Oh, great.
So.
Yeah.
I think development it will occur organically
Right.
in all 3 of those zones. And I don't think there's any guidance that can be provided or created to say, we want you here, but not here. I think retailers that show up or developers that show up that express an interest, they'll find the site that works for them. And so I think over time, you might get a combination of a little growth here, a little growth there, infill here, and it will keep going and knitting itself together back and forth such that over time, there will be a corridor. You'll look back in 30 years and say, oh, we wished we'd done this in order to make it more charming or cohesive, but that'll be the trick along the way, is to plan for, or to try to guide it, nudge it, as Shane says, in a direction that, creates that sense of place without being too overly prescriptive. I mean, back to sort of the experiential, the old urban play was whenever you saw the coffee shop spring up in the dilapidated warehouse district, that's when you knew things were starting to happen. And then it sort of evolved into, well, when you see the microbrewery happening, then you know it's happening. Something is about to take off because people have discovered it. I do ascribe to the idea of some experiential equation in that people, I think, are striving for authenticity. They're striving for some type of authentic connection with their community, and to, you know, have something sprout up in, what was the grain and feed building, or,
Yeah.
you know, that might be the type of place where something unique happens.
Right. Yeah, and then the other question I had for you is really related to building design standards. So in that core downtown area for new buildings, that is where we have our most intense or most restrictive, or our highest design standards. You know, trying to replicate that old downtown building feel with exterior finishes, and is that acceptable? I mean, do you see that as a barrier? It's going to be more expensive to build a building in the downtown than it is maybe on the 2 corridor near Quick Trip.
To be clear, you don't have to design it like an Old Town, but the Class A
Yeah.
Yeah.
finishes requirements are higher than it would be at the interchange, for example.
Then that's an argument or a good reason for some of your funding mechanisms, because if that is a city priority and it doesn't necessarily drive the feasibility for the developer or the retailer, but if that is a city priority, then that might be the type of thing that is a legitimate, you know, contribution in terms of tax increment financing, et cetera. I don't know if sustainability or energy saving initiatives are part of the equation or part of your planning process or not. That has been in the past, something that cities have been striving for, but I think that's softened a little bit. Again, back to whatever you can do to make it as straightforward and efficient for the retailer developer as possible is part of it. But I think your desire to try to guide this downtown node's character, I think that's totally legitimate.
Yeah, I feel the same, especially as I mentioned, the historic registry building. To be able to kind of play off of that, it's your history, it's your charm, it's your brand. And if you can lean into, you know, the credits, as Paul mentioned, to offset some of those costs, I think it's doable, for sure. And that, you know, those McDonald's or whoever needs their own build out in a different way, they'll go in another location.
And you're looking at the majority of our city staff that do this work. So is there, I mean, so we don't have like massive resources and an entire team doing this kind of stuff. I mean, are there, I hear we sit and wait and the organic growth will happen. Are there more things that we can be doing to entice, bring in, create those opportunities that like you would recommend, think about? I mean, obviously leveraging the track and, you know, some of the other reasons why people are coming into town, but more we can be doing to telling our story, to doing that marketing, the branding, those types of things.
Are you meeting with other cities that you're trying to grow to be and seeing what their strategy was? I know Shakopee's done a lot with the new center, like the new downtown area. They've done an interesting, you know, play with the open liquor.
Yeah.
And I know they have a really big new
monorail,
facility, but
yeah.
you have something too. So like, who could you emulate? Who could you meet with? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, people are doing it in other communities. How are they doing it? How can you bootstrap it? How can you leverage other brokerage firms or, you know, developers who are looking and entice them to come to your community? I mean, just by me being here, I'm already thinking like, who could go to, you know, Elko? So like, how can you reach those brokerage communities? Could you do some kind of an open house? Could you get somebody to, you know, to lease your space that's gonna get people through? Just thinking, you know, how to leverage other assets that are already here.
This is me thinking, you know, I'm trying to think somewhat non-traditionally here, but I think what you're describing is, in a perfect world, your unicorn is I'm gonna make this up, is a young couple with an idea. And they're gonna take on a building and they're gonna start a concept, whatever it is, and it will be a unique concept that people get excited about. Well, how do you find this unicorn, if you will? And, you know, it's somebody who's an influencer or somebody that has an extreme following on Instagram or has a TikTok account that has just like blown up, and they need a thing, they need a place to manifest that in a physical way. And so it's almost like sponsoring. I mean, I sort of think about crazy ideas like sponsoring a contest of some sort, you know? Help us discover, help us explore the Elko way, or you know, creating some momentum, some excitement, some encouragement to bring in that fresh thinking that can walk in and say, yeah, this is, I like what I see, I can do something here. But it will take a catalyst of sorts. And in traditional senses, the catalyst has been the grocery anchored shopping center. The grocer has been the catalyst for that growth. But that likely won't happen here. So what other catalysts can be encouraged or developed to tap into an opportunity that is here?
Yeah. When I was I know we're getting short on time, but I was the city planner in the city of New Prague for a number of years. And at that point in the city's history or evolution, I gave so much credit to the stay-at-home moms that decided, I'm going to start a boutique, or I'm going to start a coffee shop. And it just really created a lot of vibrancy. They're just moms that had dreams.
And I think if you set up the infrastructure to support that, and if you own those buildings, I don't know if you can keep them, if you can lease them, if you can keep the costs down, so it's not $55 a square foot, you know, if you can help kind of paint the picture in broad strokes, I think they'll come. I don't think you don't need to be pinpointing who it's gonna be, I think they'll
Yeah.
come to you.
We're looking for ideas, is the pitch.
Right.
We own these 2 buildings, we're looking for ideas to use these buildings in a way that activates our downtown.
Yeah.
Bring it.
I mean, you really need a coffee shop, you could even just build it out. Oh. So I was gonna say something that I've seen pop up in smaller communities. So I have a cabin up in Ely, which is a relatively same-sized city as this. They're clearing out like full parking lots. I notice you have a big giant parking lot next to your liquor store, and they're paying food trucks to come out, and they set up picnic tables, and it's, you know, every Saturday night, it's the thing to do, and there's an open liquor thing just for that whole area. So it seems like you have something. It doesn't need to be leasing out buildings for a lot of money. It doesn't need to be a permanent structure. So how can you play off something like that here in your own community that's already in existence?
It's really programming.
Yeah.
You know, it's a programming concept, or it's beyond real estate, but it's programming to help bring life and vitality
Yep.
to what you have.
And then they'll shop at the retail because they're there, right? They're downtown.
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand.
I think we'd like to really thank our panelists for spending the evening with us. So I know I'm really grateful for both of you to come out here and do this, so thank you. And I know the board and the panel feel the same way, so. really
Well, thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having us. Thank you
Yeah.
for allowing us to share our thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. If we can ever be a resource, feel free to, you know, reach out, let us know.
So as you walk out of here, your goals are to send at least 3 people here with different ideas.
Yes, yes.
It's not,
You know, I have a note, I know a multifamily developer that I'm gonna put it on his radar, so. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, yeah, have a good night.
Like, yeah, I would say, like, let's engage 10 people that want to engage. Yeah, I'm not looking forward yet.
Second.
Because
Aye.